Welcome to the Plant Cunning Podcast,
where we explore our relationship to plants, other people, and the mysteries of nature.
Coming to you from the high Allegheny Plateau in central New York.
We are your hosts, AC Stauble
and Isaac Hill. Welcome to another Plant Cunning Podcast. This is the Summer Astrological Quarterly Forecast. And we've got Zamboni on the show again, the resident mundane astrologer. How are you today, Zamboni? What are you up to?
Living a dream, one day at a time, just as always. You know what it is out here.
We sure do.
Yeah, how y'all feeling today? Y'all keeping it together?
We're keeping it together. Yep, we were really excited for the conference coming up at the end of the month of July.
Holler. That's going to be a party.
We'll be able to be there.
Yeah.
We were really happy to have you here last year, but we do have some amazing speakers. So, yeah, so we're getting ready for that.
Remind me what the date is for that?
Yes, so it's July 26th through 28th at our small farm in central New York. We've got Pam Montgomery, we've got Seven Song, we've got Michael A. Bryan, we've got Lisa Fazio, Rebecca Byer. So some pretty great speakers. Yeah.
A killing crew out here.
Yeah.
Did we tell you that Isaac's band, The Hills and the Rivers, is getting back together for a reunion show?
No, you didn't tell me that, but I saw the post about it, and I'm hype about that. That's super dope. I didn't realize you played like that. I knew you played some music, and then I saw you play last year, not with the band because you were like doing you sort of showed up and like jammed a little bit, and I was like, oh shit, my man Isaac can get down. I didn't realize it was like that. And you were singing and all that. It was dope.
Yeah, he's amazingly talented. Our intro music is his.
Yeah. Well, that used to be my main thing. That was my main thing for like 10 years. So
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So we're getting the band back together, The Hills and the Rivers, and it's going to be like a reunion show. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
All right.
Oh my God. Was that thunder?
It was thunder. Yeah. There's a big storm going on in my area right now. It was rolling in while we were getting ready to press the button, and now it is full on. It is happening out here. So
yeah, we have gray clouds that it looks like it's dark.
Yeah,
here,
we got a storm rolling in too. And we really, I mean, as both of us are astrologers, we picked a pretty interesting time on accident to start this, to record this episode. We have the moon exactly square Uranus. Is that what's going on in Aquarius
right now?
Yeah, that is exactly what's going on. It's pretty wild out here. Let me put the chart up real quick.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the chart of the moment. We've started recording.
Yeah. So we've got the moon here in Aquarius at 25 degrees of Aquarius, making a very close square to Uranus in Taurus at 25 degrees of Taurus. So clearly anything is possible. Anything could happen out here. It's wild. I would like to point out that we've got Jupiter in Gemini here in the 7th. So this is real good for chatting about interesting things and exchanging wisdom with another. So yeah, we're in good shape here. But you might hear some lightning or something like that in your headphones.
The lights flickered before we hit record. Your lights were flickering a little.
If there were internet shenanigans, I would not be surprised by that.
Okay, so fair warning, folks, listeners. Okay, so maybe we should run through a little bit about what we want to talk about today. So we want to talk about the ingress of the sun into Cancer for the summer season, and then we've got some fun conjunctions: Jupiter and Mars.
Yep.
A nice new moon in Cancer, which is just a next week or so, or 10 days away. We've got an eclipse season. We got the eclipse season starting at the end of September or mid-September. What else do we have?
We are going to take a look at Mars's ingress into Cancer. So currently we have Mars in Taurus. And so during this season, Mars is going to move through Taurus, through Gemini, and then into Cancer. And so as we see Mars moving through Gemini, we're going to see that conjunction to Jupiter, which is going to be splash bang time. We've got plenty to talk about there. And then after that, then Mars is going to move into Cancer, which is where Mars is going to be for a good long time. We're going to be approaching a Mars retrograde. And so that's part of the reason why that's so important. We are also going to see Pluto moving out of Aquarius and back into Capricorn. So part of the reason why that's so important is because it's opposite to that Mars in Cancer. And so we're going to have a Mars retrograde opposite to Pluto. Half of it's going to be opposite to Pluto and Capricorn, and then half of it is going to be opposite to Pluto and Aquarius. So there's a lot going on with that. So we're going to talk about all those things. And we should probably mention the Sun in Leo as well, because the Sun in Leo, this is going to be the Sun in Leo's first time opposing Pluto and Aquarius this time around. So there's plenty to see here, although it looks like this season is going to be kind of sort of getting everything into place. This is not one of our major moving and shaking seasons. We saw major moves taking place during the springtime with the Aries and Libra eclipses and all that was going on. And so we saw a lot of this sort of stuff where like stuff was moving around, Jupiter changed signs, and like stuff was moving a lot. Now we're in a position where we're sort of like getting used to where stuff is and sort of setting things up for the next major push, which is going to be happening in the fall time.
And so the scope of this is basically from now until like mid-September, and then we'll chat again in the fall.
Correct.
Sweet.
Yes. So this is the summer quarter.
Yes.
So I guess we might as well start with the summer solstice chart.
Summer solstice.
Yeah, this is the Aries Ingress. Can you see it? Is that good? Let me do. There. Maybe a little bit smaller. Okay, so this is set for Washington, D.C. It's at 4:57 p.m. on Thursday, the 20th of June, and this is 0 degrees Cancer for the sun. So this is the summer solstice. This is the Cancer ingress of the sun, the ingress of the sun into Cancer. So a couple things about this chart that's I see immediately. We've got this Scorpio rising, it's 15 degrees. We had Scorpio rising 16 degrees for the Aries ingress, and this time the Lord Mars is going into the 6th house Placidus, 7th whole sign house of Taurus with Uranus. And the 7th house is the house of foreign relations. So we've got this that doesn't look very fun. It looks kind of warlike, very kind of warlike energy there with the Mars, the planet of war, in the 7th house as the chart ruler, as the ruler of the ascendant. But we have the sun just entering the 9th whole sign house with 2 nice benefics, Venus and Mercury. So that's kind of nice for like communication. And in the mundane astrology, 9th house can often signify shipping, sea traffic, and long distance traffic, as well as universities and institutions, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a potentially a good thing for shipping and that kind of stuff. Maybe some learning. Sure. The moon is in the 2nd house. That's kind of good for the economy. But this Saturn and Uranus in the 7th house, not Saturn. This Mars and Uranus in the 7th house is a little angry. What do you see with this chart?
Yeah, definitely Mars ruling the rising and conjunct the descendant it definitely looks irritable at best, right? Yeah. I would think that, so, if we're thinking about the 7th house as foreign relations, and that means foreign to the United States, because this chart is cast for the capital of the United States, then we're going to be thinking about like other players when it comes to geopolitical relations, right? And so we can notice that the sun is in Cancer alongside Venus and Mercury. And so you call that a pretty benefic configuration. And indeed, Venus is a benefic. But what I notice here is that Venus is under the beams of the sun. And so this So this is going to sort of like sap some of Venus's power to do the like cohesive, coherent, we work together sort of stuff. And then also Mercury is there in Cancer, also under the beams of the sun. And more importantly, to my mind, Mercury in a water sign is usually not very good for explicit communications, things that are intelligible and understandable in some kind of rational or analytic kind of way. So I like Mercury in a water sign a lot for poetry and song and metaphor and this kind of thing. But if you are in a place where you're trying to make nice with foreign relations in some kind of way, you're trying to like come to an agreement about something or something like this, then this actually looks like it wants to muddy the waters a little bit. It wants to cloud our understanding of what's going on. So this, and actually I think that strongly represents some of the play that we will see in transits on the way. That like I don't think information is easily understood during this time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and Venus is kind of the planet of diplomacy as well. So communication, diplomacy are both being combusted by the sun. So it's good for the sun, but not great for either of those other planets.
One other thing that I note here is that there is the moon in Sagittarius is applying to a square to Saturn in Pisces. And that's the moon's next aspect. And so, so anytime we see the moon square Saturn, then it doesn't look like a lot of fun necessarily. It looks like maybe there might be contest around borders and stuff like this. I know that borders have been a big deal in the media recently, and the idea of like what's going on with the southern border and how are we going to deal with this. So the moon square to Saturn looks like trying to firm borders up in some kind of way, but I don't really feel like Saturn in Pisces is that good at doing borders in the first place. It's like drawing a border in the ocean. Like what's going to stop it from getting washed away immediately, Or we might think about like the border or the boundary being overwhelmed in some kind of way. So it definitely looks like there's a lot of like feeling going on here that people don't necessarily know how to deal with. And you mentioned that the moon is in the second house, which could be nice for the economy, right? But the moon square Saturn might actually look like a slowdown in economic terms. So it doesn't. I do, especially since we can see that the ruler of Sagittarius is Jupiter, and Jupiter's under a square from Saturn, and approaching that square to Saturn, we'll see that square perfected this quarter. And so it looks like big Saturn energy, looks like a lot of obstacles and barriers and difficulties to the things that we would otherwise understand as like a thriving economy or beneficial relations between nations, this kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And the Saturn is in the fourth house there too. Well, fifth whole sign, fourth Placidus. The border thing is very interesting too, because it's also like what we're seeing in terms of war, and like if the U.S. enters a war, it's probably going to be related to either Israel and Palestine or Russia and Ukraine, which are also border situations. That's often the whole thing about war is the border,
right?
A border being overwhelmed. So that's I think that's interesting and something to take into account. And then I guess the moon in the second house, that could be, maybe it's not good for the economy. So focus on the economy though.
Oh yeah. There we go.
Big focus on the economy. Okay. So I'm gonna stop this. Okay. So yeah, that's the chart. And again, it's not gonna be, it's gonna be more important just for this quarter. The Aries Ingress is more for the whole year, but this is just this mainly this quarter. So should we get into the new moon? Is that what's next?
Yeah. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was the new moon in Cancer. Now, we're not going to mention all of the lunations this month, but there was something about this one that I particularly liked because This moon is, so it's a new moon in Cancer, which is the rulership of the moon. And so it's the beginning of the moon doing moon things, right?
Yeah.
And the moon things often include like some kind of nourishment or taking care of oneself or one's family in some kind of way. One of my favorite examples of strong Cancer placements is the notorious B.I.G., who is a famous rapper. Some say he's the greatest rapper of all time. And he's got, oh, what was it now? I did a podcast about this one time where he's got, some strong Cancer placement where he ends up rapping about all the time about, he raps about gangster shit and he raps about warring and territorial conquest and all this sort of stuff. But he always ties it back to he's taking care of his mother and his daughter. So like he goes to war in order to make sure, not just to get money for himself, which he does do because he's like a drug kingpin or whatever, but like he also does it in order to make sure that his mother is going to be okay and that his daughter is going to be okay. He like talks about making tea for his mother in this kind of situation, right? He's a real mama's boy kind of dude, right? And so there's something here about taking care of one's own situation that's strongly evident in Cancer, especially since we've got not just the moon here in Cancer and the sun, obviously, because it's a new moon, but also Venus here in Cancer. This is going to empower the moon and Venus get along a lot, right?
Yeah. Both
so
water planets.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next day after this, then the moon is going to conjoin Venus. And one of the things that I really like about that is that, so we can see that this new moon here is making a sextile to Mars in Taurus and is making a trine to Saturn in Pisces. So that means that we've got soft aspects to both the no-no boys. Mars, who tends to bring conflict or tension and who is associated with irritation and violence and war, and Saturn, who is associated with obstacles, boundaries, difficulties, challenges, things that slow down and all this sort of stuff, right? Boundaries. And so and soft aspects like a sextile or a trine, those tend to be like helpful or supportive in some kind of way, right? In the coming month, we're going to see this situation change and we're going to start to see stuff making hard aspects, making squares and oppositions to Saturn and Mars. And so we're going to see this dynamic changing. But one of the reasons why I like this new moon, which is going to be happening on July 5th, and then especially there's a nice election on July 6th, the day after that, is that there's something that feels a little like piracy to me. And like maybe it's just where I am in space and time and culture and this kind of thing, but also in a moment where none of the information makes any sense and all of it feels like lies, or all of it could be understood to be propaganda. It's this sort of like, are these two choices really our choices? Like, obviously all of our choices are bad, right? And so there's something about getting along with things that are maybe like morally squidgy in some kind of way. They're like towing the line, right? You're like making friends with the no-no boys, with the villains, with the gangsters, this kind of thing. And everybody is working together in a complementary kind of way. What's up? You got something?
Well, this reminds me of, have you been keeping up with the Kendrick Drake beef?
Not really. I'm aware that Kendrick destroyed Drake.
Kendrick destroyed Drake. It was amazing. It was one of the best moments of my life, honestly.
Whoa. But all right. I didn't realize you got down with hip hop like this.
He's been really,
I like it. It's fun. Yeah. I like Kendrick also. And I love to hate Drake, but the penultimate, like the critical moment of this beef was basically Drake saying that, spilling all this tea about Kendrick, about that he was domestic violence, that he did domestic violence, that he his son was not really his son, all this stuff. And then 30 minutes later, Kendrick dropped the next song that just totally destroyed him. And he also spilled all this tea about Drake's daughter that he hasn't acknowledged. And like nobody knows if any of that stuff is true, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's kind of like where we are right now in the larger. It's like we don't know we don't know if anything is true.
Yeah.
You're just kind of
Right.
riding with it and seeing, vibing with it, seeing what feels right.
Right. So there's something here about like being able to control the narrative, and you can win
Yes.
your battle if you can control the narrative, right? And I think that this is likely to actually be one of our main points that we return to throughout this quarter, is like the information situation is so wild that and we can think about like, maintaining your own propaganda campaign in like, that's where we are in the world. Like if you can, your meme game needs to be super strong, or your branding game needs to be super strong, or your email list, or whatever it is that you're doing to like get your information out to the people, because we're in such an information centric environment, and people are actively looking for vibes that they feel like they can trust, or vibes that feel like they are on point. And so Kendrick is showing the world that you don't necessarily have to be like the Democratic Party or something like that in order to control the narrative in such a way as to destroy one's enemies. And so I think that there's good wisdom to be had there, right?
For sure. I mean, that's exactly how he won too, is he controlled the narrative. He he knew when Drake was going to drop, and he had something up his sleeve. So as soon as he dropped right after that, took all the steam out of Drake's song, and then the next day put out his #1 top hit, calling him a pedophile. So
sure.
as and everybody in the country is singing it. So
yeah.
Right. And then after that, he did this Juneteenth celebration, which was like hailed as this great unification of people, right? Like the gangs put their guns down for a moment, right? And so there's this situation here where it's like, you can destroy your enemies, and that can be so beneficial to your team that there's something really possible with being able to spit rhymes in such a dope kind of way, or say something in such a clever way as to bring all of the people together, even if that means that we come together around hatred of a common enemy, such as Drake. Like it's so easy to hate Drake.
And what Drake stands for, of like the whole corporate music industry.
Not that Kendrick isn't also playing into that, but
yeah.
Indeed, there are no perfect saviors in this moment in history. Like a SoundCloud rapper simply was not going to be able to go head to head with Drake like that. And Kendrick was positioned in this place, and so it gives us a good. I wonder if that might foreshadow a little bit of some of the wider battles that are going on, or maybe like the presidential situation, or other sort of like figurehead types, and the way that those kinds of battles might go on.
Yeah, definitely. So piracy, new moon. That's what do you suggest people do there? Go rob a bank? Not
officially endorse robbing a bank officially. I definitely don't endorse that. I do think that getting your propaganda game together is a good look here. And so whenever I think about piracy, the most important thing that I think about piracy all the time is that pirates have one rule, right? And so the rule is the thing legal or not? Pirates don't give a shit about that. Pirates care about, can the thing be done? If the thing can be done, then it is in play. And if it can't be done, then it is not in play. So there are two important things to remember with that. One is what you can do. Because if you have the capacity to do a thing, then maybe you should do that thing, because that might put you ahead, that might destroy your enemy, that might get your team stronger, this kind of thing, right? The other thing is, if a thing can be done, then maybe your enemies, maybe the man, maybe the system is going to do those things that can be done, right? So if we understand that the universal power structure as it stands, the powers that be, whatever you want to call them, if rent-seeking elites have the power to do a thing that is illegal but that can be done, then it might be worth noting that that thing can in fact be done, And so whenever we're listening to the information that comes in, like, so a super common thing is to like listen to, you know, like I wasn't on the team with the CDC from like 2016 or something like that, right? Like they've been talking all type of bullshit for years and years.
Decades.
And so
Yeah.
right, really, really long time, right? And so then when they started getting everything wrong, then I felt super good about being like, oh, but I don't have to listen to them because they've been wrong for a long time. But a lot of people were like, oh, but the CDC or the FDA, like these government institutions, they're supposed to have my back. They're supposed to, like, you know what I mean? Like they wouldn't do things that are illegal or morally wrong because they're government institutions. Why would they do that? I'm like paying taxes and all this, right? And so there was a measure of disbelief that gave them the leeway to do whatever they needed to do. And we saw what kind of devastation has come from that. We have seen what kind of devastation has come from that. And so if we are aware that this is actually the landscape, that even the elites are in fact pirates operating by this one rule, can the thing be done or can the thing not be done?
Yeah.
Then how does that change our relationship to the authority structure? Does it change our relationship to the authority structure? This is the way that I like to think about piracy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful
Yeah.
and clarifying.
And
I know, right?
yeah, it is. And you mentioned that July 6th there was a good election. So what was that about?
I know.
And-
Yeah, so
Moon's conjunct Procyon that day as well.
oh, is that a star?
Yeah, the lesser dog star.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, I'd have to let me find it. It's just it's one of the fixed stars, one of the 15 Bohemian stars.
Okay, my fixed star game is trash. It is big trash.
I'm getting into it, you know. I don't think it's actually, I don't know if it's going to be a good enough election because the moon will still be combust or under the beams.
Right, sure.
But
although the moon is going to be in Cancer and therefore in her chariot in that moment, and so it is said that will make for a decent election, even though it's under the beams of the sun.
So under the lesser dog star, Procyon, they made the image of a cock or of three little maids. It confereth the favor of the gods, of spirits and men, and giveth power against witchcrafts, and preserveth health.
And also brings quick but not lasting success.
Yes, and that it rules agates and marigold. The actual herbs are a little, the translations are a little iffy. So, but it's a fun star. And that, let me see what degree is that at? I forget. I think it's at 23 or 24 degrees of Cancer. 24 degrees Cancer.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, well, that is right there with Venus and the moon here.
Yep.
They're going to make a conjunction right there at the very end of 23 degrees of Cancer. So that might be a cute fixed star election. As I said, my fixed star game is trash, so don't listen to me about fixed star elections. But I do like the moon conjunct Venus. So a conjunction of Venus here, like, sort of protects the moon a little bit, you know, in the event that you're out here in waters that definitely have both pirates and sharks in them. Then there's something like greasing the wheels a little bit with this Venus here, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, you know, so like this gets into like how one of the things that I often think about with Venus conjunct the moon is like, okay, so if you bring someone a cookie before you ask them for something, then you're likely to put them in a good mood, right?
Yeah.
And so is that a bribe? Not exactly.
Yeah.
But like, it's adjacent.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So this is it's a good time to sweeten the no boys, is what I would say.
Okay.
Right, and it is dark waters too because of the no boys, and because it's a dark moon. It is still pretty close to the sun, so there's not very much light. You're not going to be able to really see the moon, so it's definitely darker waters.
Yeah, and so it's good for the things that need the cover of darkness, you know.
Yeah, like piracy.
Yeah.
Maybe you
Cool.
don't need to tell everybody about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe just do your thing, handle your business. Say like a little. This gift is for you. You don't even have to. Don't even worry about it. That's just remember me a little later.
All right. Thanks.
Good.
Cool.
Good cookie time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love it.
Okay. So what's the next big thing in this summer?
So the next big thing in the summer, I think, is so we're gonna see the ingress of where's my August 14th? We're gonna see Mars moving into Gemini. And then as Mars moves into Gemini, then we're gonna see Mars coming in to conjoin Jupiter.
Oh, look at all that red.
Wow.
Say what?
Look at all that red.
Oh yeah. Because this is actually a grand cross that day. So the same day that we've got the Mars Jupiter, then also the moon is in Sagittarius opposite to that. Also Venus is in Virgo. Also Saturn is in Pisces, and all of it is crossed up with each other, right? So
fun.
This is August 14th.
This is August 14th. Yeah. So we've skipped a lot of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not, like I said before, we're not going through all the lunations. We're not hitting all the pieces here. We're just sort of like hitting the highlights. But so after some time here has elapsed, then we're going to see this August 14th. Then we've got this Mars Jupiter. So whenever we see Mars conjunct Jupiter, then that usually looks like saying yes to Mars. Like confirming Mars, affirming whatever it is that Mars wants to do. Mars wants to get hot-blooded and upset and angry and wants to charge into war. Sometimes when I think about Mars and Jupiter together, one of my keywords is victory. Right? Jupiter is very good at making sure that Mars destroys all of his enemies. So we've got this with Mars Jupiter conjunction, which is also under a square from Saturn in Pisces. So this looks like, if we're back into border contests or something like this, then this looks like fighting a lot about the borders. Or if we are thinking about Saturn as the real, the things that are tangible, then we might think about sort of like fights around what is considered true. What kind, like where this is big, like alternative facts territory, right? What are the facts? No one can agree what a fact even is at this point, right? And then, so at this moment, it's worth noting that Mercury is retrograde here, right? So Mercury made it to about 4 degrees of Virgo before turning retrograde. And then at the same moment here, we've also got Venus in Virgo. So whenever I think about Venus in Virgo, one of the things that I always go to is like copy editing or revision, or in this case, maybe fact checking, something like this, right? Like, especially since Mercury is retrograde, there's a sense of like, oh, wait, I'm not sure about this information. I'm not sure that the communications are what I thought they were. And so I've got to go back and I've got to check on all that stuff. And so while that's happening, then Venus in Virgo is like checking into all the little details, checking to see where the flaws are in the argument or in the document or these kinds of things, right? Like looking at all the little details, and has a very sharp eye for that kind of thing. So what I expect to happen here, and this is August 14th, 2024, right? So we are in the run up to an election in this moment, right? And so everyone is arguing about what's true and what's possible and all of this sort of stuff, right? Donald Trump is famous for the term alternative facts, which came onto the scene in 2016 when he was trying to get elected that first time. And so I would expect this to be a moment of great contest around, especially like if there was ever a moment for the term InfoWars, this is it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Definitely seems pretty aggressive. And I, hate to be anybody with a mutable sign rising.
Yeah,
that's me. Actually, that's me. On this day, this day might be a little difficult for people with placements in the middle of mutable signs.
Why?
Well, because of this giant giant square. This is this giant cross.
The Grand Cross, yeah.
Grand Cross. Yeah. If you have planets, any like important planets or placements in the middle of the mutable signs, that's going to be a fun day.
Gonna be a lot of Mars on that shit, which is gonna probably heat things up. So whenever we think about Mars square to Saturn, Mars wants to press the gas, like pedal to the metal, whereas Saturn wants to press the brakes, also pedal to the metal. So like running them both at the same time. So this is hard on your brakes, this is hard on your tires, this is hard on your engine, this is hard on everyone who's in the car, this is hard on everyone who's outside the car. The noise is terrible. Like a deeply uncomfortable situation, especially since we can see that the moon is involved here as well, like likely to be uncomfortable in your body. And, you know, so if we're thinking about like, are the vibes right for this or that figurehead, then in this moment, it's like, especially seeing that Mercury retrograde and seeing that Venus in Virgo, the vibes are likely not right during this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is also worth noting here is that, so I didn't pull the chart for it, but so about 3 weeks ago at this point, then the sun moved into Leo. And when the sun moved into Leo, which is the sun's home sign, right? So the sun is at home in domicile in Leo, is able to do the sun things in a very sort of like comfortable sort of way as far as the sun is concerned, right? So if we're thinking about, you know, so figureheads show up with the sun, or famous faces, or the king, or gold will show up sometimes, or leadership of any sort, right? So then see that opposite to Pluto for the first time, Pluto in Aquarius here for the first time this go round. So the last year at the time of the Leo ingress, then Pluto had moved back into Capricorn by that time. So Pluto was in Aquarius for a couple of months last year, but then had moved back into Capricorn at the time of the Leo ingress. This time, as the sun moves through Leo, we're going to get that opposition to Pluto in Aquarius for the first time of like, I think it's going to be like 18 of these or something like this. And so, all right, so whenever I think about Pluto, then one of my favorite images is the funhouse mirror, right? So you like look into the mirror and you get a distorted image in response or in return as a reflection to you. Were you going to say something, Isaac? Was there something you wanted to mention?
No, I was just saying, yes, the funhouse mirror.
Oh, okay, cool.
Fun
so,
metaphor.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites. I like it a lot. So the distortion of that, I think, is really relevant here. So, you know, we're in a moment where people are like blocking celebrities on social media, right? And this kind of thing. Like, Diddy was not going to DM you, so you can block him, sure. Okay, what does this really do, right? But there's
you never know. He might have.
He might have. Maybe. I don't know. If Diddy were to DM me, I would immediately think that it was a scammer.
Yeah.
I don't think Diddy has this kind of time on his hands. Anyway, so like there are these figurehead characters who then are like people are like actively looking away from them in this moment, right? And also we can think about the presidential election. Nobody thinks these guys are in any way sound, right? And so there's a sense of like, we're not going to look at this. And so then from the perspective of figureheads, of the king, of the famous faces, then there might be something that's like a grab, like a sense of like jealousy jealousy or obsession are good Pluto words, right? There's a sense of like, I got to get the spotlight back. And that's something that is like strongly notable about Leo in general, is that Leo needs the adoration. Leo loves to be the center of attention. And so when you're not paying attention, especially when you're deliberately looking away, then that can be actively harmful to Leo, and Leo hates that sort of thing, right? So the sun in Leo making this opposition to Pluto in Aquarius looks like a moment where authority figures, figureheads, and that sort of thing are likely to make some kind of power grab. That at the same moment that there's information disruption, makes me think that the power grab is likely to be in the form of some kind of narrative that is likely to take the whole world by storm, that no one really believes. You believe your side, or they believe their side, or maybe you don't even believe your side, but you think it's the right thing to say around the people that you're around, so you're just going to say the thing. And like, so that's the sort of dynamic that I expect under this kind of configuration. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you think it has something to do with war?
Probably. Are we getting around war at this point? Like, I don't, like, I feel like the Titanic headed for the iceberg. Like, you even see the iceberg coming and it's like, all right, we're going to do our best to turn. But like, what are you going to do really? You know what I mean? Like, it's coming.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this Mars Jupiter conjunction looks fun. It looks like a nice, fun, pleasant time with no funny business happening. Also looks very easy.
Okay, so what I'm detecting right now is misinformation, and
Yes.
so
wait, I'm not lying. I'm saying the truth. No sarcasm, no misinformation.
Good
and
point.
this is an excellent point here that you are making, and I'm 100% on board. The other thing that the point that I just want to like finish up here is that there's a strong likely power grab around the narrative from authority figures or figureheads that then is likely to be in contest. And so there's a sense of like double checking all of the stuff that's going on here. On a good day, I would think that this would look like people having learned the lessons of the CDC and the FDA and all that sort of stuff that we talked about before. So maybe some of that's going on the kind of grassroots level, as much as two figureheads battling it out over whose narrative is superior.
Right. And the thing is, I mean, it has been the case that people are basically in their own worlds, in their own worldviews, and it seems hard for people to let any information enter their worldview that contradicts their preconceived notions. Like the Drake stans who still think that Drake won. He did not win. The culture at large knows that Kendrick won.
Sure.
So do you think we're going to get that kind of a moment, or like where there's like where there's more clear winning and losing around the narrative, the control of the narrative? Or do you think that it's just going to keep fracturing into echo chambers and
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think we're at the point where the echo chamber breaks yet. So yeah, I definitely would, like even, Trump has been saying loudly that if he loses, then it's an obvious case of fraud. You know what I mean? And so if he loses, then he's gonna double down, and all of his people are gonna double down with him. You know what I mean? And like here at this moment, I feel very comfortable being like, whichever way it goes, I don't know that I believe the results of the election. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's either way that it goes, I don't know that fraud didn't take place. You know what I mean? And I honestly think that maybe it's a sense of like whose fraud campaign was more fraudulent.
And this is exactly the Kendrick and Drake again. It's like both of like, so it came out kind of recently that Drake, well, it was said by certain people that Kendrick used bots to propel Not Like Us to number one, right? And
if he did, it was a brilliant strategy.
Anybody who's on those uses bots. They all use bots. It's kind of the same. It's like there's fraud either way, but it's about who actually wins. You know what I mean? So somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose, but
yeah, I mean, what you're talking about. Like somebody wins and somebody loses. That's a fact. And so then what even am a fact? And is, you know what I mean? Like, so you're immediately sunk there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like there have been two popes at the same time,
Right? Sure.
but there somebody ends up inhabiting the White House and has control over the army and so on. But I don't know, we'll see how things go. But it does seem like one of those moments. It's like where, you know, it's all it's all lies, but but there are real world implications as to how those lies are used, how how they're strategized, and who actually takes power, where the power actually moves to. Though, yeah.
So the thing that I think is that we are likely to see, and that might be actionably useful to the people who listen to the Plant Cunning Podcast, I sincerely doubt that Drake or Kendrick or a Biden or Trump or even an RFK is listening to this podcast. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
for regular folks like us, I think what is most likely to happen is, as the power structure makes pronouncements, then everybody sort of like gesticulates a little bit and then goes about their business. Everybody does the thing that they like. There's an implicit understanding that the whole thing is made of lies, and that the government itself doesn't believe most of the lies that they're saying. And so there's a certain sense, this gets back to piracy, right? Like, legal or not legal is not the distinction anymore. It's like, can the thing be done or can the thing not be done? And so legal versus illegal is going to have something to say about that. Right? Like, if you can't do the thing because it's so wildly illegal that you're likely to get caught, for example, or something like this, then, that's going to have an impact on what is possible to do. But the simple fact of legal versus illegal, for a long time, how long have people been smoking weed or whatever? You know what I mean? Like, but there's a certain sense of like, I'm just going to do me. And we're, because no matter what happens, my sphere of influence still is my sphere of influence. Me, my family, the people who I talk to on a regular basis, the people who I have in-person contact with, my cat, all of these kinds of things are still real in a way that the Kendrick bots are not. And, if you're not trying to wage that kind of campaign, you maybe don't need to get lost in the sea of bots, and maybe you can remember where your power actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And remember that a lot of your interactions online might be with bots.
Right.
Yeah.
Love that.
Okay. So what's the next thing we got going?
Yes. So the next thing that I have slated to talk about here is mostly about Mars's entrance into Cancer. So we've got Mars in Cancer here on September 5th, which is especially important because 2 days before that, on September 3rd, Pluto moved back from Aquarius into Capricorn. So this puts Mars and Pluto into a whole sign opposition for some months. We're going to see that, and that's going to be getting closer and closer for a while. And what's going to happen is Mars is going to, after this quarter is done, next quarter, then Mars is going to move in and make that exact opposition ingress into Leo, where it's going to be slow, 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 slow. It's going to stop. We're going to see a Mars retrograde at the beginning of Leo, and Mars is going to regress back into Cancer. And throughout that whole time, we're going to see oppositions to Pluto.
Oh, man.
So,
so I think it's also worth noting for folks who don't immediately recognize that Mars is debilitated in Cancer. Mars hates being in Cancer. This is the worst place in the zodiac for Mars to be.
Right. Yeah,
and
this is
for like a very long time.
Long time. Yeah. And Mars retrograde is not a super comfortable Mars, right? That's a Mars who's really ready to fuck shit up, who's ready to like, I think the thing that Austin Coppock always says about Mars retrograde is the gloves come off. Like, it's ready, it's a bare knuckle. I'm ready to break your nose about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so So then especially, so if we think about Mars as being warring or whatever, and then put that into Cancer, then it looks like a sort of dreadful and uncomfortable warring experience, right? It's a situation that feels really horrific, and that as we see an opposition to Pluto, then that's when we start to really get so we get the funhouse mirror there, right? So that's when, so if we're thinking about like the way that you can dehumanize an enemy, for example, right? Like, so they're not even people over there. And so that means that it's okay for me to do unspeakable things to that side, because they're not even people, because it's not even a real, that sort of distortion of reality makes it possible for really wild Mars. Whenever I think about Mars Pluto dynamics, I think about some of the worst, like school shootings and like this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Like killing children, or, like that sort of stuff. And
the horrors of war. The horrors.
Yeah, right. Really, really horrific sort of stuff. And so that's where we're headed at this point in the game. So as Mars moves into Cancer, we are not seeing that happen yet, but we are seeing that sort of thing move into position. And this also is the very last bit of Pluto in Capricorn. We can recall that Pluto in Capricorn goes back to 2008. So there's a financial crisis that happens in 2008. That's a big deal, right? We can think about the way that the financial system sort of, we've got the banks that are too big to fail and all of that sort of stuff, right? There's a great consolidation of power in that moment. Then we can think about Saturn and Pluto coming to conjoin in 2020, and then that sort of also following a great consolidation of power around financial institutions and government information apparatus.
Yeah, and the transfer of a bunch of wealth from middle class people into the hands of billionaires. Yeah.
Right. The sort of stratification of finances in the community at large, where there had been a more sort of like bell curve kind of situation. Now there's a great divide where there's a valley in the middle. And so Pluto in Capricorn, Pluto coming back to Capricorn, is moving away from the Mary Wollstonecraft Frankenstein monster sort of situation where we're thinking about the horrors of the future. We're thinking about AI, or we're thinking about the cotton gin. I did an episode on the cotton gin recently, where there's this like technological innovation which makes the continued existence of slavery possible, or these kinds of things, right? Horrific tech is what Pluto because horrors is what Pluto does, right? Pluto's the god of the underworld and this kind of thing. Underbelly, things rot, things that are toxic, this sort of stuff, right? So moving from Aquarius, which is like sort of the horror and or fear of tech, and also power. Great power comes along with that. The craft of astrology is associated with Pluto and Aquarius, right? So there's great power in whatever Pluto touches. So moving from that Aquarius and moving back into Capricorn puts us back into a place where there is, from the position of the powers that be, who want to sit on top of a pile of resources, this looks like a return to an ability to do that, to sit on top of that pile of resources. And then if we're seeing Mars in opposition to Mars, then we're also going to likely see the escalation of conflict that might be the sort of situation where figureheads have noticed their power slipping out of their hands, and so there's a doubling down on the things to make sure that I get to stay on top of my pile of resources. And if that means that the chains have to come out, the cages have to come out, or these kinds of things, then that's what that means.
Okay.
I'm full of bad news today. Sorry.
I'm like, okay. Well, we knew that it's not going to be pretty, but
yeah, I mean, we kind of said this in the year ahead and in the Aries Ingress that this is not a pretty year, and it's also a setup year. Things are getting set up for the next few years.
It's a trap.
It's a trap.
It's a setup.
Yeah, and it's just worth noting that a classic way for people with lots of power to make lots of money and consolidate their power is with war.
Right. Classic.
Yeah.
Tried and true, that method.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is just something that we're going to see going on. And we are, so at the moment that Mars moves into Cancer, then all of the Mars stuff gets real uncomfortable, and we don't necessarily see the kind of like horrors of war that I'm talking about with Pluto, but we do start to see that building up. And that's kind of what a whole sign aspect is, right? Like we start to see some inklings of this, and there's a little bit going on and a little bit going on. And then as we move closer to a degree-based opposition, then that's the moment that we would really expect to see the kind of flashy, events that take place.
And this is going to happen 3 times, 3 exact oppositions between Pluto and Mars.
Correct.
It's happening later though, probably. When do you know when that's happening?
The first one is, I think, is it October? And then there'll be another one, I think, in January, and then and after that. So there's a forward, a backward, and a forward. The first one is in Capricorn, Cancer, and then the second 2 are Leo, Aquarius.
Okay.
So it's a lot. It's a lot going on. We're in a moment where we see, and it's like we knew this already, right? Like power is, or empire is in a moment of crashing down a little bit, or not functioning as strongly as it had been at one point in time. If we're thinking about, like post World War II, Bretton Woods sort of stuff, like the solidification of the American empire as the global superpower, things are not functioning that way anymore. But if you are the kind of person who was sitting on the top of that empire, then you are not going to be pleased to see that slipping away. And so you're going to do everything in your power to make sure that you get to sit on the top of the thing for as long as possible.
Even if the things that you end up doing hasten its demise.
Right.
It's like the final death throes,
Yeah, like the U.S. really shouldn't. It's kind of a catch-22 for the elites of America getting into another war. If they lose it, that's the end. That's the end of the U.S.'s global hegemony. So it's kind of like, well, I guess we'll see.
We shall see. We shall see what happens. I don't think that it's necessarily all, nightmarish. Yeah. Like there are a lot of people who can see that. And, so the way that we've been describing it up to this point makes it sound like there's a conspiratorial cabal that is running everything, which I don't say is not true, but is likely not the only thing in operation. So, there are incentive structures, in the way that people make money and the way that markets work and this kind of thing, that have a lot of people on board for a lot of things that might be a little bit morally reprehensible or something like this, but that people are going to go for because the market is pushing you in that sort of direction, right? Yeah. But that means that there are a lot of people who aren't necessarily bought in at the conspiratorial cabal level, who might see things in a lot of different kinds of ways. There might, like the example that I've had a lot is the sense that, like, you publish a book that has a lot of sort of counter cultural information in it, and then the power is like, no, you can't publish, like, or we're going to stop the distribution of that book. But then not only you, the author, but then all the people in the publication company and all the people in the bookstores who, like, if there's a market for this book, we want to make money on this book. And so there's a lot of people who are invested in the sale of this book, which has information which goes counter to what the cabal would want published, right? And so there are market forces that even could undermine if there were a conspiratorial cabal, then market forces could potentially undermine that as well, and could speak to a kind of grassroots understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, and like, I mean, you could say cabal. You can also like the elite class of the U.S., and it's actually kind of an international class. But you know, you don't have to be part of a secret group if you've all been to the same college, if you've all been educated at
Sure.
Yale and Harvard and Princeton, and to stay in those schools, you have to adopt a certain mindset. Then to go from those schools, then to be a CEO, you know, what working in the bureaucracy, any of these levels in this you have to kind of adopt certain mindsets. It's just a group think.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be a like a conspiracy type of thing, though I'm sure there are plenty of conspiracies going on. But there are also a lot of people who have power who aren't entrapped in that worldview or that group mind. And then there are a lot of people there's a lot of power outside of those centers of power or outside of those group minds, you know. So there's a lot more wiggle room, and one of the other things is that like right now that group mind, the elites of the US are senile to a certain degree because they're kind of trapped inside their worldview, so they don't see what things are like for most people.
Right.
So there's a lot of like you could just think about, you know, I don't think it's going to be exactly like this, but in the French Revolution, leading up to the French Revolution, these aristocrats really didn't know what was going on. You know,
Let me cake.
Right, let him eat cake. Like that shows the obliviousness. I mean, and I'm sure they're not all oblivious, but for the most part, they don't know what's really going on in the day-to-day lives of people, and I think they'd be surprised. But
yeah, and in an information landscape that is so highly contested, there is a lane for heterodox thinking.
yeah,
There are, in fact, many lanes for many ways of heterodox thinking, right?
right. There's a lot of heterodoxy going on right now.
Exactly. It's almost a point of pride for a lot of people, and
Yep.
so you know there are likely to be, so when we think about the age of air, then we can think about how like sort of power is concentrated in information rather than in like land and resources. And so that's an interesting thing. But then also if we just think about air dynamics, like it disperses stuff, right? It takes, like if you've got a pile of leaves and then a windy day happens, then you don't have a pile of leaves anymore. The leaves are again in all the places, right? And so there is, it seems to me like there are avenues of getting some leaves that might not have to center on the, like you might be able to ignore stuff or exist in a different informational landscape that could provide opportunities. I in fact think that there's a lot of freedom in this, that freedom isn't necessarily comfortable. That's one of the things that like Americans often forget, because Americans are used to being comfortable in the land of the free or whatever. But you know, like freedom is there, you can go in any direction, and that can sometimes be terrifying because you don't necessarily have a correct path that is like the thing to do. But because you've got such freedom, you can, if you have a head on your shoulders and you are able to sort of stay tuned in to your sphere of influence and the kinds of ways of gathering and verifying information that make sense in your local space, then you can actually derive a lot of local power in that. And you'll likely get some opportunities that wouldn't have been available to you at the moment when, in the 50s, for example, when everything was like kind of like all the structures were working in that moment, you know?
Yeah. There's a lot more opportunity in times of crisis.
Absolutely.
So yeah. What?
Well, I mean, so we've got that at the end of the quarter, we've got a full moon that you could think of as a lunar eclipse, but Honestly, because the eclipses straddle the ingress into Libra and the fall time, I think it might make sense to discuss eclipses on the next go round.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's like eclipse season doesn't really start until
It's the fall.
the fall. So let's
Yeah.
do that.
Cool.
Maybe we'll record it in early September and
We'll do a good job recording on time next time.
yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, this has been any last words of wisdom for the folks? I think you that was pretty good too, what you just said.
Yeah.
But anything else? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think I've said the things that are really the most important. I would really emphasize piracy, especially around the informational network. And so this means using the pirate's rule in one's own life, but then also understanding that others also can only abide by that one rule. And so if you can move your head to see things in that way, then already you're going to be at an advantage around how things are working and therefore how I should respond to the situation at large than people who still think that the law is true.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So yeah, let your freak flag fly and also let the skull and crossbones fly. Do you think?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zamboni. This has been great.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for having me on again. It's always a delight to talk to y'all. Every time. And everybody should go to plantcunning.com to go.
PlantCunningConference.com. Get your tickets for the Plant Cunning Conference, July 26th, 28th at our small farm in central New York. It's a beautiful little farm. And
meet these beautiful people who are such amazing hosts, who are such a delight to be around. You have noticed throughout this whole conversation what amazing conversationalists they are, what wise people they are, what excellent questions they ask, and they are so very good at getting the people together. Last year's conference was super dope. I'm dismayed that I can't make it this year, but a great host of amazing people are going to be there, including these two, including Pam Montgomery and Seven Song, and y'all heard the list at the top. It's going to be so dope. Y'all should go check it out.
Thanks, Zamboni.
Yeah. And do you have anything coming up that you'd like to talk about?
Currently, I'm in the middle of my foundations course, so it is probably too late to sign up for that. So you might have to check the next one. But if you want a reading, you can always go to ZamboniFunk.com. You can listen to music there. I have my own podcast where I get into, my plan is to think much more in depth about what information am and how to exist with it in this time and place. And so folks are welcome to follow there. ZamboniFunk.com. Check it out. All the things.
Okay, great. Well, looking forward to the fall forecast with you in September.
Great job on the foundations course and having your own astrology school. That's very exciting. I'm very proud of you.
Yeah, it's dope. I'm pretty excited about it. Been working a long time towards this.
Heck yeah. Great job. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Zamboni. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, appreciate y'all. See you next time.
Yeah.